Hanel's CEO had everything people respected and nothing that made him happy. At 36, he had become the face of CEO Group after dragging the company through years of brutal internal fights after his father's stroke. Business magazines called him disciplined. Investors called him brilliant. Employees called him terrifying. But every morning he woke up already tired. His penthouse stayed quiet all the time. No music, no mess. No forgotten coffee cups on counters. No arguments from another room. Everything sat exactly where it belonged. Jaeyoon Myeol Han fit perfectly into that life. Elegant, calm, smart. Careful with words. She directed one of Seoul's biggest museums and carried herself like someone raised under constant observation. Her family loved order. His family loved reputation. Together, they looked untouchable in public. She loved him honestly. That was the painful part. Jaeyoon noticed things other people missed, like how Hanel stared at nothing after parties ended. How he loosened his tie like it hurt to breathe after interviews. How he never talked about the future unless it involved business. How he looked relieved whenever she canceled dinner plans because of work. Their relationship never exploded, never collapsed, never burned hot enough to destroy anything. It simply existed. Safe. Mature, empty. Still, Hanel convinced himself this was adulthood. Peace mattered more than passion. Stability mattered more than obsession. That afternoon, he entered a private jewelry boutique before the official engagement announcement. No security team, no media, just him. The employees recognized him instantly and straightened themselves nervously. A woman guided him toward a private display room lined with soft lights and velvet trays. Diamond rings glittered behind glass. Hanel barely looked at them. The employee kept explaining cuts and clarity while he nodded without listening. He felt detached from the moment, like he was completing paperwork instead of choosing a ring for the woman he planned to marry. Then he heard laughter. Loud, reckless, children's laughter. Not polite rich kid laughter, real laughter. One child screamed. Another one cackled right after. The sound hit him so suddenly that his chest tightened. He frowned and looked toward the front of the store. A little boy was climbing onto a white leather chair while a little girl tried pulling him down by his sweater. A woman stood beside them holding too many shopping bags while apologizing to a stressed employee. "Asher, get down before you crack your head open." Her voice stopped him completely. His body reacted before his brain did. He turned slowly. Naima, alive, standing less than 20 feet away. Her hair was tied up badly like she had rushed it in the car. Dark curls escaped everywhere around her face. She looked thinner than he remembered. More tired too, but she still moved the same way. Fast hands, fast reactions, eyes scanning everything at once. For 1 second he forgot how to breathe. The ring box slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor hard. The sound echoed across the store. Naima looked over automatically, then froze. All color disappeared from her face. The shopping bags slowly slid from her hand. Neither of them moved. The little boy looked between them curiously. Then Hanel noticed his eyes, his exact eyes. Not similar, the same sharp shape, same heavy stare, same slight downturn at the corners when confused. Hanel's stomach dropped so violently he grabbed the glass counter beside him. Then the little girl crossed her arms impatiently and looked directly at him with an irritated expression so familiar it almost made him sick. It was his face too, just smaller. "Oh my God," Naima whispered, not dramatic, not loud, just defeated. The girl tugged on Naima's sleeve innocently. "Why does that man look like Asher?" Nobody in the store spoke. Hanel stared at the twins again. Twins. His knees nearly gave out. Naima immediately grabbed both children close to her like instinct had taken over her body. Asher looked confused by the tension. Solo looked suspicious. Hanel finally forced words out. "How old are they?" Naima swallowed hard but said nothing. "How old are they, Naima?" "5. That answer hit harder than screaming would have. 5 years. 5 years. He looked at her stomach automatically like his brain still could not connect the truth. Pregnant, she had been pregnant when she disappeared. Naima looked terrified now, Not guilty, not angry, terrified, like she already knew everything was about to explode. Years earlier, they had met in Chicago in the worst possible way. Naima had publicly humiliated him during a community fundraiser after assuming he was another rich investor trying to shut down her neighborhood art center project. She cursed him out in front of donors, artists, volunteers, and reporters. Hannel had stood there stunned while she pointed in his face and called him an emotionally dead corporate robot wearing a $1,000 coat. Then later that night she learned he had secretly funded the entire project after city sponsors pulled out. She showed up at his office embarrassed and defensive. Instead of apologizing properly, she accused him of enjoying watching her embarrass herself. He should have hated her. Instead, he became fascinated. Naima disrupted every controlled part of his life. She talked too much when nervous, burned food constantly because she got distracted mid-conversation, picked fights when she felt ignored, climbed onto kitchen counters while arguing, fell asleep during movies then denied it afterward, and she laughed at him constantly, especially when he got too serious. Meanwhile, Hannel became the first person who made her feel emotionally safe enough to stop performing strength all the time. That terrified her. Their relationship became intense quickly. Loud arguments, jealousy, late-night apologies, broken dishes, sudden kisses in parking lots, long drives after fights because neither wanted to go home angry. Naima kept stealing his expensive hoodies. Every single time she got upset, she claimed they smelled emotionally stable. Hannel pretended it annoyed him. Secretly, he loved finding them missing. They married quietly against both families' wishes. Then life in Korea slowly destroyed them piece by piece. Naima struggled immediately. People stared too long. Comment sections ripped her apart. Hannel's family treated her like temporary damage that would eventually disappear. And Hannel kept failing her in small ways that became big ones. Missed dinners, broken promises, late nights. Phone calls unanswered. Then she got pregnant during the worst part of their marriage, but she didn't know if she was ready to tell him. Then came the night that ended everything. Naima overheard Hannel's mother asking him to quietly end the marriage to avoid permanent embarrassment to the family. Hannel refused immediately, but then his mother asked him one final question. Was he truly willing to destroy his family's company and legacy for a marriage already falling apart? And Hannel stayed silent for too long. Naima left that same night, pregnant, crying, humiliated. She never heard him finally explode at his mother afterward. Months later, divorce papers arrived. Hannel signed them out of pure rage, believing she had abandoned him willingly. And now 5 years later, they stood inside a jewelry store staring at the damage they had created. If you're already stressed, you haven't seen anything yet because this reunion is about to ruin every single person involved. But before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Should Naima have told him about the twins, or did Hannel deserve to lose them after what happened? Naima moved first, not calmly, not gracefully. She grabbed Asher's wrist, pulled Solil close with her other hand, and headed toward the boutique entrance so fast that one of the shopping bags ripped open behind her. Toy boxes spilled onto the floor. She did not stop to pick them up. "Mommy," Solil asked quietly. "We're leaving." Hannel finally snapped out of the shock and followed immediately. "Naima," she kept walking. "Naima." The sharpness in his voice made several people turn. Outside, the winter air hit hard. Cars moved slowly through the crowded street, while people passed them without knowing a family was collapsing in public. Naima spun around instantly. "Do not follow me." Hannel looked at the twins again. His children, his children. The thought would not settle properly inside his head. It kept hitting him over and over. "You had my children," he said. "You had my children and disappeared." Naima laughed once, not because anything was funny. It sounded exhausted. "You signed divorce papers without even trying to find me. You vanished. You let me vanish." Hannel stared at her in disbelief. "Are you insane?" "I searched for you for months." "Months," she shot back. "You think months fixes that?" Asher looked between them nervously. Solil grabbed Neyma's coat tighter. Hanel's voice rose without him noticing. You had no right to hide them from me. Neyma stepped closer immediately. And you had every right to make me feel unwanted while I carried them. People nearby had started slowing down openly now. Nobody interrupted. The tension was too obvious. Hanel looked wrecked already. Neyma looked furious enough to collapse. You decided alone, he said. You took 5 years from me. I took 5 years, she repeated. You stood there and let your mother discuss my babies like a business problem. I said no. You paused. That hit him hard because it was true. Neyma's eyes were filling now, but she kept talking anyway. You paused long enough for me to understand exactly where I stood in your life. You left before I finished the conversation. You should never have needed to finish it. The twins looked scared. Now. Asher slowly moved closer to Solil. Hanel noticed immediately. The sight made him feel sick. His children were comforting each other because of him. I didn't know you were pregnant, he said, quieter this time. Neyma looked at him like he had said something stupid. You knew we were trying. You sent divorce papers. I sent pain, she snapped. Not closure. That confused him completely. But before he could ask anything else, Solil suddenly spoke. Mommy, I want to go home. Her voice shook. Neyma immediately crouched down and touched her face gently. We're leaving right now, baby. Asher looked up at Hanel carefully. You made my mom cry. The sentence destroyed something inside him. Hanel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Neyma stood again and pulled both children close. You do not get to show up now and act betrayed, she said quietly. You don't get that privilege. Then she walked away. This time Hanel did not follow. He stood there in the middle of the sidewalk while people stared openly at him. His hands shook violently. He barely noticed Jaeyoon calling his phone 3 times. That night he sat alone inside his penthouse replaying every second of the encounter. Twins, a son, a daughter, 5 years old. He kept seeing Asher's face, his eyes, his expressions, even the way the boy frowned looked familiar, then Solil. The irritated look she gave him felt so painfully familiar it almost hurt physically. He poured whiskey into a glass and left it untouched. The apartment suddenly felt unbearable. Too clean. Too quiet. His eyes landed on the engagement ring box sitting on the kitchen counter. He stared at it for a long time, then shoved it into a drawer hard enough to crack the wood. His phone buzzed again. Jaeyoon. He ignored it. Instead, he opened the private investigator reports he had buried years ago. Pages and pages of failed searches, old addresses, disconnected numbers. Dead ends. He had stopped looking eventually. That truth made him hate himself. Meanwhile, Neyma sat on the floor of her apartment bathroom trying not to panic while the shower ran loudly beside her. Her hands would not stop shaking. Outside the bathroom door, the twins were watching cartoons like nothing had happened. Children adapted too quickly. That scared her sometimes. She pressed both palms against her face hard. She had known this day might come eventually, but not like this, not suddenly. Not with Hanel, looking at the twins like someone had ripped his heart open in public. Later that evening, Hanel sat inside his dark apartment, staring blankly at his phone, when an accidental social media story notification appeared. Neyma had been tagged in a short video. His thumb froze instantly. The twins were sitting at a kitchen table eating cereal while laughing loudly during a video call. A man's voice came through the speaker. Who's picking you up tomorrow? You, Asher yelled happily. Obviously me, the man answered. Your mom drives like she learned in prison. Solil burst into laughter. Then both twins shouted together. Good night, Dad. Hanel stopped breathing. The man laughed softly through the phone. Good night, monsters, school tomorrow. Don't terrorize your teachers. The video ended. Hanel stared at the screen for several seconds, then his jaw tightened slowly. Because now he believed another man had raised his children while he knew nothing about them. Hanel stopped functioning normally after that video. For 5 years, he had forced himself into routine. Meetings, contracts, public appearances, gym at 6 in the morning, dinner with Jaeyoon twice a week, sleep after midnight. Now everything broke apart. He became distracted during meetings. Snapped at employees over small mistakes. Forgot conversations halfway through. One director repeated the same question 3 times before Hannel realized he had not heard a single word. At night, he replayed the video over and over. "Good night, Dad." The word stayed inside his head constantly. Dad. Another man heard that word every day while he heard nothing. The jealousy became ugly fast. Not quiet jealousy, humiliating jealousy. He started finding excuses to pass by the twins' school. The first time, he stayed inside the car across the street for almost an hour. Children poured out through the gates screaming and running while parents checked phones or carried bags. Then he saw them. Asher spotted Naima first and sprinted toward her so recklessly she nearly dropped her coffee trying to catch him. Solil walked slower beside another little girl while correcting her aggressively about dinosaurs. Naima looked exhausted already. Her coat was half-buttoned, one earring missing. Hair tied carelessly again, but when she looked at the twins, her face softened immediately. Hannel stared too long, then Asher suddenly looked toward the street, directly at his car. The boy frowned slightly, exactly the same way Hannel did while concentrating. Hannel gripped the steering wheel harder. The next day he came back again, then again. Soon he knew their schedules without meaning to: school pickup times, soccer practice. The small park Naima took them to on Saturdays. He hated himself for it, still kept showing up. One afternoon, he sat on a bench near the playground, pretending to check emails, while secretly watching the twins argue over snacks. Asher liked peeling grapes before eating them. Hannel did the same thing. Solil hated tomatoes with dramatic passion, exactly like him. Then Asher sneezed suddenly after rubbing his nose. Naima immediately grabbed medicine from her bag without hesitation. "Allergies again?" she asked. Asher groaned. "I hate pollen." Hannel stared. Same allergy, same reaction. His chest tightened painfully. He started noticing everything after that. The way Asher crossed his arms when annoyed. The way Solil narrowed her eyes before insulting somebody. Tiny things. Tiny things he should have known years ago. Then came the part that made everything worse. The twins liked him immediately, especially Asher. The boy became openly curious after spotting Hannel repeatedly near school and parks. Children noticed patterns faster than adults realized. One afternoon, Asher walked straight up to him while Naima bought drinks from a nearby cart. "You're following us." Hannel nearly choked on air. "I'm not." "You are," Asher replied calmly. "You park badly too." Hannel blinked once. The boy sounded exactly like Naima while insulting people casually. Asher studied him carefully. "Your watch costs more than my mom's car." "Asher," Hannel said before thinking. The boy's eyes widened slightly. "You know my name." Hannel realized his mistake immediately. Before he could recover, Solil appeared beside her brother and looked Hannel up and down suspiciously. "There's that sad rich man again." Hannel stared at her. "Solil," Asher whispered. "That's rude." "It's true," she answered. "He always looks like somebody canceled his birthday." Hannel actually almost smiled, almost. Then Naima returned holding juice boxes and froze instantly after seeing them together. Asher pointed casually. "He keeps showing up everywhere." Naima looked exhausted immediately. "Hannel, what?" he asked defensively. "You are stalking children." "I'm observing." "That sounds worse." Solil nodded seriously. "Very creepy." Naima accidentally laughed, just once, quick, sharp. Real, the sound hit Hannel so hard he forgot what they were arguing about. He had not heard her laugh in years, not forced politeness, not bitterness, real laughter. Naima stopped smiling the second she noticed him staring. The tension returned instantly. "Children," she said firmly, "say goodbye." Asher looked disappointed. Solil looked relieved. "Bye, sad rich man," Solil said while walking away. Naima looked horrified. "Solil, what? His face is depressing." Even Hannel laughed quietly at that one. Naima glanced at him automatically. For 1 second the years disappeared. Then she looked away quickly. That night Hannel could not stop thinking about the moment, not because of the joke, because it felt normal, simple. like they were accidentally becoming a family for a few seconds before reality interrupted. The next spiral came when he saw Malachi in person for the first time. Tall, attractive, comfortable around the twins. Asher ran into his arms instantly after school, while Solil climbed onto his back dramatically. Hanel watched from inside his car with rage burning through him. The man kissed Neyma's forehead casually before helping load groceries into the trunk. The familiarity between them made Hanel sick. That night he finally confronted Neyma directly outside the twins' apartment building. "You replaced me quickly." Neyma looked genuinely confused. "What?" The musician. Realization crossed her face slowly, then disbelief, then irritation. "Oh my God, you let my children call another man dad." Neyma stared at him for several seconds before laughing once out of pure frustration. "You really think Malachi is my boyfriend? He practically lives with you. He practically raised your children while I almost died." That sentence shut him up immediately. Hanel's expression changed. "What?" Neyma crossed her arms tightly. "I hemorrhaged after giving birth. I had postpartum depression so bad I stopped eating properly for weeks. Malachi slept on our couch because I was afraid to be alone with the babies." Hanel looked like someone had punched him hard. Neyma kept going anyway. "You know what your son's first fever looked like?" "No, because Malachi handled it while I cried in a hospital bathroom from exhaustion." "Hanel, no. You don't get to stand here acting betrayed because another person helped me survive what you were not there for." He looked shaken now. Actually shaken. "Why do they call him Dad?" "Because children name love before adults do." The answer destroyed him quietly. Then another voice interrupted behind them. "So this is the husband." Malachi stood near the entrance holding a saxophone case and 2 grocery bags. His face stayed calm. His eyes did not. Neyma immediately looked stressed. "Malachi, no, seriously," he said while staring directly at Hanel. "I've wanted to meet the man who left her alone with newborn twins for years." "I didn't know," Hanel said immediately. Malachi laughed without humor. "That line must help you sleep at night." Neyma rubbed her forehead hard. "Please don't start." But Malachi was already angry, not explosive anger. The kind built slowly over years of watching somebody suffer. "You know what she looked like after those babies were born?" he asked Hanel coldly. She stopped recognizing herself. She stopped sleeping. Some days she wouldn't even hold the twins because she thought she'd ruin them. Hanel went completely still. "And every time I asked about you," Malachi continued, "she defended you while falling apart." Neyma looked humiliated now. "Enough." "No," Malachi said quietly. He should hear it. Hanel could barely speak, because for the first time he fully understood something terrible. Neyma had not escaped happily. She had survived alone. Jaeyoon noticed the change before anybody else did. At first, it was small things. Hanel stopped answering her texts for hours, then apologized without explanation afterward. He forgot dinner reservations he had personally made. During meetings, he stared at his phone constantly like he was waiting for something more important than work. Then came the part she could not ignore. He started smiling again, not often, not fully, but enough for her to notice immediately because Hanel almost never smiled anymore. The first time she saw it happen, they were attending a museum charity event together. A photographer accidentally bumped into a server carrying champagne, creating a loud mess near the entrance. Everyone flinched. Hanel looked down at his phone instead. Jaeyoon caught the expression before he hid it, a real smile, small, private, immediate. "What happened?" she asked. Hanel locked the screen quickly. "Nothing." But Jaeyoon had already seen the photo notification. Neyma, standing beside the twins while Solil held up a terrible school drawing proudly. Jaeyoon said nothing after that. She simply watched more carefully. And the more she watched, the more obvious everything became. Hanel became emotionally reactive in ways she had never seen before. A board member joked casually about interracial celebrity marriages during dinner one evening. Hanel shut him down so coldly, the entire table went silent. Another night Jaeyoon mentioned children during a conversation about future plans. Hannel immediately changed the subject. Then there was the jealousy, ugly jealousy, the kind impossible to hide. One afternoon, Jae-yoon entered his office unexpectedly and found him staring at a paused photo on his tablet. Naima stood beside Malachi outside a grocery store while the twins laughed near them. Hannel looked furious. Jae-yoon understood instantly, not the full story, but enough. "You love her," she said quietly. Hannel looked up sharply. "No," the answer came too fast. Jae-yoon almost pitied him for it. Meanwhile, Naima was trying desperately not to fall backward emotionally. That became harder every week, because now Hannel was involved constantly. The twins wanted him around, especially Asher. Asher asked questions nonstop. Why did Hannel hate tomatoes too? Why did they both sneeze around flowers? Why did they both organize French fries by size before eating them? Naima kept trying to shut conversations down before they became dangerous emotionally. But children did not understand emotional boundaries adults built for survival. Then co-parenting started happening naturally, and nothing about it felt safe. School meetings, doctor appointments, unexpected pickups, birthday planning, tiny moments that kept forcing them into each other's space. One afternoon, Asher got sick during school and begged specifically for Hannel to pick him up because Naima was stuck at work. Naima almost said no automatically. Then guilt hit immediately. Hannel arrived at the school in less than 15 minutes. Asher looked miserable wrapped in a blanket inside the nurse's office. The second Hannel entered, the boy relaxed visibly. Naima noticed. That hurt more than she expected. Later that evening, Hannel brought soup to the apartment after hearing Asher refuse to eat. Naima opened the door looking irritated already. "You cannot keep showing up every time something happens. He asked for me. That doesn't mean you get to play house." Hannel looked offended instantly. "I brought soup. You brought emotional confusion." Before the argument could continue, Asher appeared behind her weakly. "You made dumpling soup," Hannel nodded once. Asher looked genuinely excited. Naima closed her eyes briefly in frustration. Then Solil walked into the kitchen, saw Hannel, and sighed dramatically. "Sad rich man again." Hannel looked at her flatly. "You insult me every day. You keep returning, that sounds personal." Even Naima almost smiled again. That became the problem. The familiarity kept slipping back naturally. Too naturally. Hannel still remembered how Naima took her coffee. Naima still knew exactly when he was angry before he spoke. One evening during birthday planning for the twins, they argued over decorations for 20 straight minutes while sitting across from each other at a bakery. "You're not turning this into a corporate banquet," Naima snapped. "It's a birthday party. You rented a violin quartet. They're children, not prisoners. They're turning 6, Hannel. They want cake and noise, not Mozart." A nearby customer started laughing quietly. Naima noticed first and got embarrassed immediately. Hannel noticed second. Then for one dangerous second, they both looked at each other the same way they used to during marriage. Comfortable, sharp, alive. Naima broke eye contact first, always first now. Because every soft moment scared her immediately afterward. Then came the hospital night, the worst one. Solil split her eyebrow open during recess after crashing into playground equipment, while trying to prove she could jump farther than another student. Naima arrived at the emergency clinic panicked and furious at the same time. Solil cried harder because Naima looked stressed. Then Hannel showed up after the school contacted him too. The second Solil saw him, she pointed angrily toward the nurse. "They said stitches." "You survived," Hannel told her calmly. "I look ugly. You looked dangerous before this too." Solil stopped crying long enough to think about that, then nodded slowly. "Fair." Naima accidentally laughed under her breath despite herself. Hours passed slowly afterward. Solil finally got treated and fell asleep stretched across 2 chairs while holding Asher's hand. Asher passed out soon after too. The clinic became quieter. Naima sat upright beside the children trying to stay awake. She had worked all day before the accident. Her body was exhausted. Hannel sat across from her watching silently while she fought sleep stubbornly. "You should rest," he said quietly. I'm fine. You're falling asleep sitting up. I said I'm fine. 5 minutes later, her eyes closed anyway, her head tilted awkwardly against the chair. Hanul stared at her for a long moment. Then, without thinking, he removed his jacket and placed it carefully over her shoulders. Automatic, gentle, familiar. The exact thing he used to do whenever she fell asleep anywhere during their marriage. Naima stirred slightly, but did not wake fully. Hanul looked away immediately afterward like he had done something dangerous. An hour later, Naima woke slowly. The jacket slid slightly as she moved. She froze instantly. Because she remembered this feeling too well. She looked across the room. Hanul sat beside Asher pretending to scroll through emails while exhaustion sat all over his face. Naima quietly removed the jacket and folded it carefully. She acted normal, too normal. Thanks, she said flatly. Hanul nodded once, nothing else. But later, while Solil slept at home and Asher brushed his teeth, Naima locked herself inside the bathroom alone. Then she cried silently with Hanul's jacket still clutched tightly in her hands. Because no matter how angry she stayed, her body still remembered loving him before the damage happened. Jaeyoon asked Naima to meet her alone 3 days later, not at a restaurant. Not somewhere dramatic, a quiet museum cafe before opening hours. Naima almost refused immediately, but curiosity won, and guilt. Because no matter how complicated things became, Jaeyoon was still the woman publicly attached to Hanul, while all of this exploded behind closed doors. Naima arrived tense already. Jaeyoon sat near the window with black coffee untouched in front of her. Perfect posture, calm face, but her eyes looked tired. Naima stayed standing at first. You wanted to see me? Jaeyoon nodded toward the chair across from her. Please. Naima sat slowly. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. The silence felt uncomfortable immediately, not hateful. Heavy, Jaeyoon finally broke it. Hanul has not slept properly in weeks. Naima looked down at the table. That's not my responsibility anymore. No, Jaeyoon agreed quietly. But you are still the reason. Naima stiffened slightly. She expected bitterness, accusations, humiliation. Instead, Jaeyoon looked painfully honest. I always knew there was someone else, she admitted. Naima looked surprised. He never cheated, Jaeyoon continued quickly. Not physically. But there was always a locked room inside him that I could not enter. That sentence sat heavily between them. Jaeyoon gave a small, tired smile. I thought marriage would fix it. Naima swallowed hard. It won't. I know. Jaeyoon looked out the window briefly before speaking again. He smiles around you. Naima immediately looked uncomfortable. He smiles around your children. He gets jealous. Irritated, emotional, human. The last word sounded important. Before this, Jaeyoon said softly, loving Hanul felt like standing beside somebody already halfway gone. Naima had no response to that, because she understood exactly what Jaeyoon meant. Jaeyoon finally looked directly at her. And the worst part is I don't even hate you. That hurt more than anger would have. Naima rubbed her thumb nervously against her cup. Jaeyoon noticed. Hanul used to do the exact same thing when anxious. Then came the question, the one that destroyed everything inside Naima quietly. If you still love him, Jaeyoon asked carefully, why did you let everyone suffer for 5 years? Naima froze completely. Not because she had no answer, because she had too many. Fear, pride, pain. Humiliation. The memory of standing pregnant in a hallway listening to people discuss her children like damage control. The memory of Hanul staying silent. The divorce papers. The loneliness afterward. But underneath all those reasons sat another truth she hated facing. She never tried to go back either. Naima's eyes filled slowly. Jaeyoon watched her carefully but did not interrupt. I thought leaving first would hurt less, Naima admitted finally. Her voice sounded small. I kept waiting for him to come after me properly. Then the divorce papers happened and I convinced myself he never wanted us. Jaeyoon stayed quiet. Naima laughed once bitterly. And after enough time passed, going back started feeling embarrassing. That sentence sounded painfully real because it was. Years passed faster once shame became involved. Jaeyoon nodded slowly like she understood more than Naima expected. Then she asked softly, "Was loving him worth all this damage?" Naima answered immediately. "Yes." No hesitation. That answer emotionally wrecked both of them, because it was honest. Meanwhile, that same evening, Hanul finally learned the truth about the divorce papers, and it happened by accident. His mother had organized a formal dinner with extended relatives, hoping to force life back into normal appearances. Hanul barely paid attention through most of it. Then an older woman casually mentioned Naima's cousin, Rochelle, the same cousin who stayed with Naima briefly during the pregnancy. Hanul looked up immediately. "What about Rochelle?" The relative frowned slightly. "She used to brag about mailing those divorce papers herself before Naima changed her mind." The entire table went silent. Hanul stared at her. "What did you say?" The woman looked confused now. "She said Naima panicked afterward and begged her not to send them, but Rochelle did it anyway because she thought your marriage was already dead." Hanul stopped hearing the rest properly. His chest felt tight instantly. "She begged her not to send them?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately, because suddenly everyone understood something terrible. Hanul stood up so abruptly his chair hit the floor. His mother looked alarmed. "Hanul, you knew." His voice sounded dangerous now. His mother looked genuinely shaken. "I only heard rumors afterward. You knew there was a possibility she never meant to end the marriage." "Hanul, calm down." That made him laugh harshly, not because anything was funny. Because he finally understood the full truth. Naima thought he abandoned her. He thought she discarded him. Neither fought hard enough through the pain. Neither trusted the other enough to stay vulnerable after getting hurt. They destroyed their marriage together, not through hatred, through fear and pride. The realization crushed him. That night he drank for the first time in years. Not carefully, not socially. He drank alone inside his office until his hands shook and his chest hurt. Then he drove without thinking. Rain poured heavily across Seoul by then. Thunder cracked loudly overhead while streets blurred through the windshield. By the time he stopped the car, he was outside Naima's apartment building. He sat there for several minutes staring upward at her lit window, then finally stepped outside into the rain, completely soaked within seconds, not angry, not dramatic, just broken. He leaned against the hood of the car and covered his face with one hand. For years, he blamed her completely because it was easier than facing his own failures. And now every memory hurt differently. The unanswered phone calls, the signed papers, the months he stopped searching because anger felt safer than heartbreak. Rain soaked through his clothes while he stood there crying quietly where nobody should have seen him. But children notice everything. Upstairs, Solil walked toward the window after hearing thunder. Then stopped suddenly. "Mom!" Naima looked up from folding laundry. "What?" Solil pointed outside. "That sad rich man is crying near our building." Naima froze instantly. Asher rushed toward the window too. Both twins stared downward silently. Hanul stood alone under the rain with his head lowered completely. No security, no assistance, no composure, just pain. Asher looked confused. "I thought grown men didn't cry." Naima swallowed hard. "They do." Solil frowned while watching him. "He looks sick." Naima could not answer. Because for the first time since meeting Hanul, the twins were not seeing him as the intimidating stranger hurting their mother. They were seeing someone wounded. And children stop fearing adults once they realize adults can break too. Asher quietly grabbed an umbrella near the door. Naima looked at him immediately. "Asher, he's gonna get pneumonia." Before she could stop him, Solil grabbed another umbrella too. And for the first time since this disaster began, the twins moved toward Hanul together instead of away from him. Asher reached Hanul first. The umbrella barely covered half his body because he was running too fast through the rain. "You're getting soaked," he said breathlessly. Hanul looked up immediately. For 1 second he looked embarrassed to be seen crying at all. Then Solil walked over too, holding her umbrella badly sideways. "You really do have sad rich man face," she said quietly. But this time it did not sound mean. Hanul laughed weakly through wet eyes. Naima stood near the apartment entrance watching the entire thing happen. Her chest hurt, not because Hannel looked broken. Because the twins were already moving toward him naturally, and some selfish part of her had hoped they never would. After that night, the distance between them became impossible to maintain properly. Not officially, not verbally, but emotionally, everything became too close, too personal, too familiar again. Asher started texting Hannel random questions through the tablet Naima allowed for school use. What was the strongest animal? Why did adults drink sparkling water if it tasted angry? Could sharks get hiccups? Hannel answered every single message immediately no matter where he was. Board meetings, dinner events, traffic, nothing mattered more. Meanwhile, Solil pretended to dislike him while slowly becoming attached too. She started correcting his clothes constantly. Your tie makes you look like a disappointed principal. Or, why are your apartment colors so sad? Even Hannel's employees noticed he became different around the twins. Lighter, less controlled. One afternoon, Asher dragged Hannel into a toy store while Naima argued with customer service nearby. Hannel looked completely lost, surrounded by loud toys and screaming children. Asher pointed toward a dinosaur set excitedly. You had these when you were little, Hannel nodded. My father hated them. Why? He thought they were distracting. Asher looked horrified. That's evil, Hannel laughed unexpectedly. A real laugh. Naima turned instantly at the sound. She stared at him too long without meaning to, because she had forgotten what he sounded like. Happy. Not polite, not restrained, happy. Their eyes locked accidentally. Neither looked away immediately. That became the dangerous part. The chemistry returned harder now because grief sat underneath it. Every interaction felt loaded. Hands brushing while reaching for the same thing. Eyes meeting too long during conversations. Arguments becoming personal too quickly. Protectiveness appearing automatically. One evening, Solil fell asleep across Hannel's shoulder during a movie at Naima's apartment. Nobody moved for nearly 20 minutes because they were both afraid of waking her. Naima finally whispered, "You can put her down now." Hannel looked at Solil quietly. She feels safe. The sentence affected Naima more than it should have. Then came the domestic moments. The ones that felt almost cruel because of how natural they still were. Cooking dinner together while arguing over seasoning. Folding tiny laundry side by side in silence. Asher interrupting serious conversations to ask impossible questions. Solil insulting everybody equally during board games. Malachi watched the tension grow carefully. One night after the twins slept, he cornered Naima in the kitchen. You're slipping. Naima kept washing dishes without looking at him. I'm co-parenting. You're emotionally relapsing. That made her stop moving completely. Malachi sighed tiredly. I watched you spend years rebuilding yourself. Don't act like this isn't dangerous. Naima's voice lowered immediately. I know, because she did know, that was the problem. Loving Hannel still felt too easy, too automatic, like her body remembered him before her brain could stop it. Then movie night happened. The twins forced everybody into the living room after Asher insisted normal families watch movies together. Naima almost corrected him instantly, then stopped herself. The movie itself barely mattered. Solil kept criticizing the actors dramatically. Asher kept asking questions nobody could answer. At some point, Naima fell asleep accidentally near the far end of the couch. Exhaustion hit her hard lately. By the time the movie ended, both twins were asleep too. Hannel sat quietly for several seconds just looking at them. His children, his family, the thought still overwhelmed him every time. Then he noticed Naima pulling unconsciously at the sleeve of his hoodie, the one he had removed earlier because Asher spilled juice on him. Naima had wrapped herself in it while sleeping without realizing, exactly the way she used to during their marriage. Hannel stared at her silently. 5 years disappeared for one painful second. Because there she was again, curled against his clothes after falling asleep during a movie, like nothing terrible had happened between them. His chest tightened so badly, he stood up suddenly and walked toward the kitchen before emotions showed too obviously on his face. He braced both hands against the counter, breathing unevenly. Then quietly broke down alone. No anger, no shouting, just grief. Because for the first time in years, something felt like home again, and that terrified him. Naima woke up later confused and embarrassed after realizing she still wore his hoodie. She removed it quickly before Hanel returned, but the damage was already done emotionally. After that night, she started pulling away. Subtly at first, taking longer to answer messages, avoiding eye contact, canceling dinners involving all of them together. The twins noticed immediately. Especially Asher. "Did you and Hanel have another grown-up fight?" Naima nearly dropped her coffee. "We are not having anything." Asher looked unconvinced. Solil narrowed her eyes from across the table. "You only use his full name when you're panicking emotionally." Naima stared at her daughter in disbelief. "You are 6, and observant." Naima rubbed her forehead tiredly, because the truth was simple. She still loved him too much, and every good moment terrified her now. The more normal things became, the more afraid she got. Afraid of depending on him again. Afraid of rebuilding something fragile. Afraid of the twins getting hurt if things collapsed twice. Meanwhile, Hanel immediately sensed the distance growing, and panic changed his behavior fast. He called more often, showed up unexpectedly, tried forcing conversations Naima avoided. One evening outside the twins' school, he finally confronted her directly. "Why are you avoiding me?" Naima kept helping Solil into her coat without looking at him. "I'm busy." "That's not true. That sounds like your opinion." Hanel stepped closer. "You were fine 2 weeks ago." "I remembered reality." The answer hit sharply. Hanel lowered his voice immediately. "Tell me what you want me to fix." Naima laughed bitterly. "You still think this works like business." His face tightened instantly. "That's unfair." "No. What's unfair is how easy it is to forget pain when you miss somebody enough." For a second, Hanel looked helpless. Actually helpless. And that scared Naima more than anger ever could. Because she almost reached for him automatically. Instead, she stepped back. "We need boundaries." The words visibly shook him. Asher looked between them nervously. Solil sighed dramatically. "Oh brother, here they go again." Neither adult reacted, because both of them already felt the same thing. The relationship was becoming dangerous again. And Hanel was getting desperate enough to make reckless decisions. Hanel made the worst decision of his life 3 days later, and at first, he convinced himself it was honesty. The official engagement announcement dinner had already been planned for weeks. Investors, reporters, business partners, museum directors, political families, everybody important was there. Jaeyoon stood beside him wearing a cream-colored dress while cameras flashed non-stop. She looked beautiful, calm, prepared, and completely doomed. Hanel barely heard anything during the speeches. His chest felt tight the entire night. Every time somebody congratulated him, guilt hit harder. Because for the first time in years, he stopped lying to himself. He did not want this marriage. Not because Jaeyoon lacked anything, but because he was still emotionally trapped somewhere else, still in love, still attached. Still unable to let go of Naima no matter how much damage existed between them. Jaeyoon noticed the exact moment he made his decision. His expression changed first, then he reached for the microphone. Her face went pale instantly. "Hanel," she whispered quietly. Too late, the ballroom slowly quieted. Cameras turned toward him automatically. Hanel looked directly ahead while speaking. "I need to apologize publicly tonight." The room became still. Jaeyoon lowered her eyes. Hanel continued anyway. "I cannot continue this engagement." Gasps spread immediately across the ballroom. Somebody dropped a glass. Camera flashes exploded violently now. Jaeyoon stood frozen beside him while reporters began shouting questions instantly. Hanel's mother looked horrified. "What are you doing?" she hissed sharply, but Hanel kept talking. "This decision is entirely my responsibility." Jaeyoon deserves honesty, not obligation. Jaeyoon looked humiliated in a way that physically hurt to watch, not angry, wounded, because despite everything, she had loved him sincerely. And now the entire world was watching her get abandoned publicly by a man emotionally haunted by another woman. The internet exploded within minutes. Articles, photos, speculation, rumors. By midnight, reporters had already connected Naima to the story. Then came the twins. That changed everything from messy to cruel. Pictures of Asher and Solil started spreading online after paparazzi tracked down their school. Comment sections became vicious immediately. People called Naima manipulative, a gold digger, a homewrecker. Some comments focused directly on race. The cruelty became uglier by the hour. Naima sat frozen at her kitchen table reading headlines while her hands shook. Malachi grabbed the phone from her immediately. "Stop looking. This is my fault," she whispered. "No, this is his disaster." But Naima barely heard him. Because outside her apartment building, photographers were already gathering. The next morning became chaos. One paparazzi photographer followed Asher directly toward the school gate asking questions about Hanul. Asher got scared and started crying. Solil screamed at the man to leave her brother alone. Naima nearly lost control publicly when she arrived. "Back away from my children." Cameras kept flashing directly into her face. "Ms. Cole, are you reconciling with CEO Hanul? Did you intentionally hide the twins? Did you break off the engagement?" One reporter shouted. "Do you think Korean society rejected you because you're black?" Naima snapped completely. "Those are children," she yelled. "Move!" The video spread online within an hour. Then Hanul's mother made everything worse. During a press statement about the cancelled engagement, she referred to Naima as a regrettable complication that resurfaced unexpectedly. Naima watched the clip once, then turned the television off immediately. Malachi looked furious. "That woman talks about you like mold." But Naima barely reacted, because she was already breaking down internally. The twins noticed everything now. Asher became quieter. Solil started arguing with strangers online through Naima's unattended tablet until Malachi discovered it. One evening, Asher finally asked the question Naima feared most. "Did we ruin everybody's life?" Naima looked like she stopped breathing for a second. She pulled him into her arms immediately. "No, but everybody keeps yelling because of us." That sentence shattered her, because children always blame themselves eventually. Meanwhile, Hanul's company stock dropped heavily due to public scandal and investor panic. Board members demanded damage control immediately. His mother stopped speaking to him privately unless necessary. Jaeyoon disappeared from public view completely. And Hanul finally understood the full consequences of acting emotionally without thinking beyond his own pain. He kept trying to contact Naima. She ignored every call, every message. Until finally, he showed up outside the apartment again. Naima opened the door, already furious. "No, hear me out. No, the twins, you do not get to say their names right now." Hanul looked exhausted. "I was trying to fix things." Naima stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Fix things?" Her voice rose sharply. "You publicly destroyed a woman who did nothing wrong because you panicked emotionally." Hanul looked hurt immediately. "I told the truth. You detonated everybody's lives in front of cameras." The twins stayed hidden quietly in the hallway listening. Naima kept going because she could not stop anymore. "You think love fixes damage automatically. You think feeling guilty suddenly makes you brave. That's not fair. No, what's unfair is my children getting photographed at school because you wanted emotional redemption." The word hit him hard. Redemption, because part of her was right. Part of him had believed dramatic honesty would solve years of pain. Instead, it created new damage instantly. Naima's voice shook now from pure anger. "I spent 5 years trying to give them stability after everything collapsed. 5 years. I know." "No, you don't." She stepped closer. "You still move through life like your choices only destroy you, but they destroy everybody around you too." Hanul went quiet after that. Because for the first time since reconnecting with Naima, he fully understood something terrible. Love alone was not enough, not when recklessness kept hurting people, not when children were involved. Naima looked exhausted suddenly, not angry anymore, just tired. I cannot do this again, she admitted quietly. That scared him immediately.
Hanul, she said softly, loving you always costs me something. The sentence stayed inside him painfully. Then she closed the door. The next morning, Naima disappeared. No warning. No messages. The apartment was empty. School records transferred. Phones disconnected. Even Malachi was gone. Hanul stood inside the empty apartment hallway staring at the locked door while panic spread through his body so violently he felt sick. Gone again. This time with the twins too. And unlike before, he finally understood exactly why she left. That realization destroyed him completely. Hanul stopped pretending life was normal after Naima disappeared again. He still went to work. Still attended meetings. Still signed contracts. But people noticed the silence immediately. Not cold silence. Absent silence. Executives repeated questions because Hanul drifted halfway through conversations. His assistant found him standing inside empty conference rooms staring at nothing more than once. At home things became worse. The penthouse felt wrong now. Too large. Too quiet. He kept expecting noise that never came. Small footsteps. Arguments. Soleil insulting his furniture. Asher asking impossible questions from another room. The absence became physical. One night he opened his refrigerator and realized he had bought grape juice, strawberry yogurt, dinosaur-shaped pasta, and the cereal Asher liked without thinking. None of it belonged to him. He stood there staring at the groceries for a long time before shutting the refrigerator slowly. Another evening he walked past the guest room he had started secretly preparing for the twins. The room still held unopened toys and tiny blankets. Hanul sat on the edge of the small bed and covered his eyes with one hand. No tears came this time. He felt too emptied out for that. The worst moments happened automatically. He heard phantom laughter constantly. In elevators. Parking garages. His own hallway. Once he turned around inside a bookstore because he swore Soleil had just called him sad rich man behind him. Nobody stood there. At night he replayed old memories obsessively. Naima asleep wearing his hoodie. Asher grabbing his hand naturally crossing the street. Soleil pretending to dislike him while sitting closer every day. He realized too late that he had started building his entire emotional life around them again. Now everything felt amputated suddenly. Meanwhile Naima was unraveling quietly too. She rented a small apartment temporarily in Busan under another name while Malachi handled most outside errands to avoid media attention. The twins adjusted faster than either adult. Children always adapted faster. That frightened Naima sometimes. Asher asked about Hanul every day at first. Then less. Then not at all. That hurt worse somehow. One night after the twins finally slept, Naima sat on the kitchen floor eating nothing while Malachi cleaned dishes nearby. You look terrible, he said bluntly. Thank you. I'm serious. Naima leaned her head against the cabinet behind her. I know. Malachi dried his hands slowly before sitting across from her. You miss him. Naima laughed weakly. That obvious? You look like somebody quit breathing halfway. She rubbed both hands over her face tiredly. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Naima finally admitted the truth she kept trying to outrun. I still love him enough to ruin myself again. The sentence sounded ashamed. Malachi looked at her carefully. Not judgmental. Just sad. That's the problem, Naima whispered. Every time I love him, my life falls apart eventually. Malachi stayed quiet because he had watched it happen before. Not just heartbreak. Erosion. Naima lost confidence during the marriage slowly. Lost sleep. Lost pieces of herself trying to survive emotional isolation in a country that constantly reminded her she did not belong. And now she was slipping emotionally again. She laughed less lately. Barely ate properly. Checked her phone constantly despite claiming she wanted distance. You know what scares me most? She asked quietly. Malachi shook his head once. I was happy again for a little while. That sentence hurt him to hear. Because people recovering from pain often feared happiness more than sadness. Sadness felt predictable. Love did not. Then came the phone call. Late at night. Unknown number. Hanul answered immediately because he barely slept anymore. Silence greeted him at first. Then a small voice. You sound crusty. Hanul sat upright instantly. Soleil? Obviously. His chest tightened painfully. Where are you? Mom said not to tell you. Relief and heartbreak hit him together just hearing her voice again. Are you okay? I'm not the one wandering around looking emotionally unemployed. Even exhausted, Hanul almost smiled automatically. Soleil went quiet for a second afterward. Then her voice softened slightly. Mom cries more when she thinks we're asleep. That smile disappeared instantly. Hanul closed his eyes hard. Soleil. And she still sleeps holding your old hoodie. Everything inside him stopped. Completely. He could not speak. Soleil kept talking softly, unaware she was destroying him sentence by sentence. The gray one with the ripped sleeve. Hanul remembered it immediately. Naima stole that hoodie years ago after one of their worst fights in Chicago. She claimed it smelled safe. He never got it back. She hides it under her pillow when people visit, Soleil continued. But I saw. Hanul pressed a hand against his mouth sharply. 5 years. 5 entire years apart. 5 years believing she stopped loving him enough to leave forever. Meanwhile she had been sleeping beside something that belonged to him the entire time. The waste of it hit brutally. All the loneliness. All the pride. All the assumptions. Years lost because neither knew how to stay vulnerable after getting hurt. Hanul? His voice finally came out rough. Yeah? Soleil hesitated slightly. Are grown-ups always this bad at loving each other? That question nearly destroyed him completely. Hanul visited his mother alone 2 days after Soleil's phone call. Not as a son seeking comfort. Not as a businessman handling damage control. Just tired. The house looked exactly the same as always. Clean floors. Quiet staff. Everything carefully controlled. His mother sat in the garden drinking tea when he arrived. She looked older lately. Not weak. Just worn down. You look terrible, she said softly after seeing him. Hanul sat across from her without answering. For several minutes neither spoke. The silence between them felt familiar in the worst way. A lifetime of conversations nobody knew how to have. His mother finally placed her cup down carefully. If you came here to blame me again. I came because I finally understand something. That interrupted her immediately. Hanul stared ahead while speaking. I built my entire life trying to earn love from people who treated affection like a reward. His mother's face changed slowly. Not defensive. Careful. Hanul kept going. I thought if I worked hard enough, behaved correctly enough, sacrificed enough, people would choose me permanently. His voice stayed calm. That made it hurt more. When Naima loved me, I didn't know what to do with it. His mother looked down quietly. She loved loudly. Recklessly. Honestly. And I kept responding like a businessman managing risk. The truth sat heavily between them. Hanul laughed once bitterly. When things became difficult, I wanted guarantees before vulnerability. I wanted certainty before sacrifice. And now, his mother asked quietly. Now my children barely know me. That sentence finally shook her. Hanul looked at her directly for the first time. You taught me survival, he admitted. But you never taught me how to feel safe being loved. His mother's eyes filled immediately. Because she knew it was true. Hanul leaned back slowly, exhausted. I kept waiting for Naima to prove she would stay before fully choosing her. Silence. Then finally. I became exactly like father. His mother shut her eyes hard after hearing that. No, she whispered immediately. But Hanul continued anyway. Emotionally absent. Controlled. Loving people while making them feel alone. The garden felt painfully quiet afterward. Then his mother finally broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just honestly. I hated her at first, she admitted softly. Hanul stayed still. Not because she was cruel. Not because she disrespected you. Her voice trembled slightly now. I hated how free she loved. That surprised him. His mother wiped beneath her eyes quickly. She walked into rooms like she belonged there emotionally. She argued openly. Cried openly. Wanted things openly. A painful smile appeared briefly. She loved you without strategy. Hanul felt his chest tighten. And I envied her for it, his mother admitted. That truth sounded ugly to her. Embarrassing. But real. I spent my entire life earning approval from cold people, she continued quietly. My parents. My husband. Society. I learned very early that survival meant restraint. Hanul said nothing. Because suddenly he saw it clearly too. Generational damage disguised as discipline. His mother looked away. When I saw Naima loving you so fearlessly, part of me wanted to punish her for having something I never allowed myself. The confession sat between them painfully. She made me feel emotionally small, his mother whispered. And instead of confronting that honestly, I treated her like the problem. Hanul looked devastated listening to her. Not because he hated her. Because he finally understood her. That hurt differently. His mother covered her face briefly. I destroyed your marriage too. You damaged it, Hanul corrected quietly. But I helped destroy it myself. That honesty broke something inside her completely. For years she blamed Naima entirely because blaming herself felt unbearable. Now her son sat across from her carrying visible emotional ruin. And she helped create it. Meanwhile, across the city, Jiun packed quietly inside her apartment. No reporters knew yet. No public statements released. Just open suitcases and folded clothes. She moved slowly through the rooms like someone leaving behind a version of herself she no longer wanted. An assistant from the museum called anxiously asking if she planned returning next month. Jiun answered calmly. No. You're resigning completely? Yes. The woman sounded shocked. But your entire career. My entire career was built around being chosen by emotionally unavailable people. The honesty surprised even Jiun herself. After ending the call, she sat alone on the floor beside half-packed boxes. For years she convinced herself patience could earn deeper love. If she stayed graceful enough. Understanding enough. Undemanding enough. Eventually somebody would fully choose her. Instead she kept attaching herself to people emotionally locked away from her. First her father. Then Hanul. And every time she called it maturity instead of loneliness. Her phone buzzed quietly. Hanul. Jiun stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. I heard you're leaving Korea, he said softly. Yes. I'm sorry. Jiun laughed faintly. You already apologized publicly once. I think the nation heard you. Hanul closed his eyes briefly. I never wanted to humiliate you. I know. That almost made things worse. Because cruelty without intention still damaged people permanently. Jiun's voice softened slightly. You know what the saddest part is? Hanul stayed quiet. I really thought if I loved you carefully enough, eventually you'd wake up and love me the same way. His chest tightened painfully. Jiun smiled through tears he could not see. But you were grieving someone else the entire time. Silence filled the call afterward. Then she said quietly, "I hope this time you stop treating love like something you must earn after suffering enough." The line disconnected gently after that. And for the first time, the audience understood something devastating. Every person in this story had spent years begging for love in the only ways they knew how. And almost all of them got hurt because of it. Naima decided to leave Korea permanently 2 weeks later. Not impulsively. Quietly. Carefully. She filled out school transfer forms while the twins ate breakfast beside her arguing over pancakes. She contacted an old friend in Chicago about temporary housing. Malachi helped organize paperwork without asking too many questions. Nobody said the obvious thing aloud. She was running before love became dangerous again. The twins reacted differently after she finally told them. Asher looked devastated immediately. Soleil looked angry. At him or Korea? Malachi asked carefully afterward. Naima answered honestly. Both. The media attention had slowed slightly but never disappeared completely. Parents at school still whispered. Reporters still followed sometimes. Online comments remained cruel. And beneath all of that sat another truth Naima hated admitting. She did not trust herself around Hanul anymore. Loving him still affected her judgment too strongly. The night before the flight, she sat alone folding laundry while staring at Hanul's old hoodie beside her. The gray one. The ripped sleeve. She held it against her chest briefly before stuffing it into her suitcase aggressively like she was angry at herself. Meanwhile, Hanul found out about the flight too late. One of the school administrators mentioned the transfer accidentally while discussing paperwork. By the time Hanul reached the airport, boarding had already started. He ran through the terminal anyway. Not elegantly. Not like the controlled man people respected publicly. Just desperate. His breathing sounded rough by the time he spotted them near the gate. Naima stood beside the twins holding passports tightly while Malachi adjusted Asher's backpack nearby. Then Asher saw him first. Dad. The boy broke into a sprint instantly. Soleil followed right behind him while dragging her tiny suitcase badly across the floor. Hanul dropped to his knees automatically before both children crashed into him hard. For several seconds nobody spoke. Asher hugged him so tightly it hurt. You came late, Soleil complained quietly, but her voice shook. Hanul held them both carefully like he was afraid they would disappear again. Then he looked up. Naima stood several feet away completely frozen. The second their eyes met, he understood immediately. She looked shattered already. Not cold. Not hateful. Just exhausted by loving him. Malachi slowly stepped back, giving them space without saying anything. Naima swallowed hard. You shouldn't be here. I know. Then why did you come? Because I failed the last time you left. The honesty in that answer hit her visibly. Naima looked away first. Again. Hanul stood slowly while the twin stayed close beside him. For once, he did not rush his words. Did not defend himself immediately. Did not try controlling the outcome. He simply looked at her honestly. I was weak. Naima's eyes filled instantly. Hanul continued before fear stopped him. I thought silence would protect everyone. I thought staying calm made me responsible. His voice shook slightly now. But really, I was just afraid. The airport noise faded around them emotionally. People walked past. Announcements echoed overhead. None of it mattered. I loved you badly, Hanul admitted quietly. Naima pressed her lips together hard. Because this was the first time he had ever spoken this openly without being forced into it. Hanul looked directly at her. I confused providing for you with protecting you. Her breathing became uneven immediately. You needed emotional safety and I kept offering solutions instead. Naima wiped her face angrily. Hanul. No. Please let me finish this properly for once. That stopped her. Because years ago, he would have shut down emotionally before reaching this point. Now he stayed. Even while hurting. I made you feel alone during the worst time in your life, he said quietly. And after you left, I let pride convince me you stopped loving me first. Naima started crying silently. Not graceful tears. Exhausted ones. Hanul's voice lowered further. Every version of my future still ends with you. That destroyed her completely. Because he finally said the thing she waited years to hear. Not polished promises. Not practical reassurance. Emotional truth without escape routes. Naima covered her mouth trying to hold herself together. I don't know how to trust this, she admitted brokenly. Every time I love you, something terrible happens. Hanul nodded immediately. I know. No defensiveness. No argument. Just acceptance. And that's my fault too. The twins watched quietly now. Even Soleil stopped interrupting. Naima looked at him helplessly. You hurt me so badly. I know. You made me feel invisible. I know. And I still love you anyway, she cried. Hanul's face crumpled instantly after hearing that. Because he understood how terrifying that confession was for her. Naima shook her head emotionally. I hate that I still love you this much. Hanul stepped closer carefully. Not forcing. Not demanding. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. His eyes looked wrecked too. I'm asking you to let me stay this time when things become painful. That sentence broke the final wall inside her. Naima started sobbing openly. Years of grief. Fear. Anger. Love. Everything collapsed at once. Hanul pulled her into his arms carefully and she held on to him immediately with the desperation of somebody exhausted from surviving alone too long. The reconciliation looked messy. Both crying. Both shaking. No dramatic music moment. No perfect forgiveness. Just two damaged people finally choosing honesty before pride. Asher burst into tears too because children cried whenever adults cried hard enough. Soleil hugged all three of them aggressively while muttering. This family is emotionally exhausting. Even Naima laughed through tears after hearing that. 1 year later, life still looked imperfect. But real. The family split time between Seoul and Chicago now. Not because problems disappeared, but because they finally made decisions together instead of alone. The twins remained chaotic. Asher still asked impossible questions daily. Soleil still insulted everybody equally. Malachi became their favorite uncle officially after introducing them to his new boyfriend, Thierry, who secretly kept sneaking chocolates into their backpacks despite Naima's protests. Jiun opened a small art gallery in Paris and finally looked peaceful in photos for the first time in years. Hanul's mother rebuilt trust awkwardly through the twins. Mostly by bribing them with expensive snacks and listening quietly whenever Soleil criticized her emotional communication skills. Then one evening in Seoul, Naima accidentally discovered something while searching through storage boxes in Hanul's private closet. Vacuum-sealed bags. Stacked carefully. Confused, she opened one slowly. Inside sat an old hoodie. Then another. Then another. Every hoodie she had ever stolen from him during their marriage. Every single one preserved carefully for 5 years. Naima stared at them speechless while Hanul froze in the doorway behind her. You kept these? Hanul looked embarrassed for the first time in days. I couldn't throw them away. Naima's eyes filled immediately. Because despite the divorce papers, despite the silence, despite the years apart, he never emotionally let her go either. And that became the real ending of their story. Not perfection. Not fantasy. Just two emotionally damaged people finally understanding something neither learned growing up. Love is not staying until things become painful. Love is staying after they already did. If this story destroyed you emotionally, like this video, subscribe, and tell me honestly in the comments. Who hurt this family the most, Hanul, Naima, or the people who taught them love had to be earned?